Yeah.
We are back.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is gonna be a fantastic episode. Welcome, guys, to another episode of Money Mondays, talking about raising capital, investing with purpose. I'm your host, Kalisha, and I got my co-host.
That's
See?
going. We've missed you guys. It was kind of
It feels long because we've only missed 1 week.
really missed 1 week, but it felt like forever.
It does. Oh my gosh. Guys, I hope you've missed us because we've missed you all. And we got so much in store for you guys. We've been recording tons of content. So if you haven't subscribed to our channel as yet, guys, hit that subscribe button. What's the other one? It's the notifications thingy.
The little bell.
Little bell. And what we're going to talk about today, guys, it's going to be super, super valuable. It's going to be one of those episodes that you have to re-listen and you got to like back up a little bit and be like, what's going on, you know? Before we dive in, Betsy, don't kill me, but there you go.
Yes, the following information is for educational purposes only. Please do your own diligence. We do not provide financial, legal, or professional advice. Everything that we talk about is from our experience, our point of view, our own situations. Every situation is different. Please talk to a CPA or an attorney to get more information on your specific situation.
Yes, guys, this is just our opinion and expertise, and the guest that we're bringing on, he's the perfect person to give that advice. So anything we gotta say, we'll be like, nothing. But before we even bring on our guest, thank you for everyone who is watching. And for those who are listening in the future, we're available on all podcast platforms. So we're talking Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and there's some other ones. iHeartRadio, there's a bunch. You can follow us, find us at Kels and Betsy, and you will see all the shows and the episodes that we have. Hey, Jarrell. Hi, Claus. Hey, everyone. Thank you for tuning in again.
Yes, we're so happy to be here, and we're so happy that we're able to provide this for you. We have been recording so much content for you guys. We've been learning so much. We get inspired by everyone that we bring.
And that's the thing. Like, we bring on so many new guests, and we're learning as we go along.
Mm-hmm. And you guys get to see that in real time.
We're not experts. We're just like you. You know, we're sharing what we've learned. And we're learning some things, a lot of things that Nick is going to talk about today can be completely new to us. If you guys have questions or anything like that, like be sure to have them in the chat. But you ready to go?
Yes, let's do it.
Yes, talking about Inside the Legal Toolbox with Nick McGrue, guys. Hello.
Hey, thank y'all for having me. I'm excited.
I love the intro. It's amazing.
And we're so happy to have you. Thank you for coming on our show, our Money Mondays, where we talk about money and how to protect your money, and how to grow your money, and everything money.
The legal way to do everything. This is the right person, guys. You need to talk to. You know, every time there's a saying, oh, talk to an attorney, talk to a CPA, but you never really do it. You kind of go on the internet and find ways to do it, or get advice from other people to do it. But now is your chance. We got Nick here, and even after you got, we're going to provide all the info, how you can stay in contact with him, set up a consultation, whatever it is that's needed. We're going to drop that info in the description. So before we even dive in, for those who don't know Nick, give us a little intro. Who is Nick McGrue?
Who is Nick McGrue? That's something that I'm trying to figure out myself. But I think the words you're looking for is kind of what I do. So I am the founder of Polymath Legal PC, At Polymath Legal, we help real estate investors lawfully raise capital so they can generate passive income while creating generational wealth. And so we focus on helping clients raise capital for their projects, for their deals, and making sure that they're navigating the very complex rules around raising that capital. So we're talking about raising money, talking about getting investments, talking about getting that equity for your project. That's probably something that we can assist you with on the legal end.
Gotcha. We're just gonna dive right in. So Nick, with Betsy and I, we mainly focus on raising capital. And a lot of the lenders that we find them through social media. We also do a little bit of marketing on social media as well. But I know there are some things that you can and cannot say. Can you touch on that a little bit when it comes on to raising capital for entrepreneurs, what they should consider when doing it on social media?
Yeah, what words should we not be using?
Yes.
Yeah. So one thing that I'd say is that if you are, reaching out to people on social media, the first thing you want to do is understand what kind of regulations you're responsible to comply with. Because when you're raising capital, not every time, but a lot of times, if we have passive investors, there's a good chance that we're selling a security, in which case we have securities laws that we've got to deal with. And if we're selling a security, we either have to register that security or have an exemption. And some of the exemptions don't allow for general advertising. So I'd say before you even get into, what you can or cannot say, I'd say before you even start saying anything, you want to understand which rules are going to apply to you. And with that, understand, do these rules allow you to advertise or not? Because if they say you can't do general solicitation, then you shouldn't be saying anything on social media to begin with. But let's say that we are in a situation where we can do that general solicitation. A lot of it's kind of what we would think would be common sense, but we have to make rules about it. So maybe it's not so common. But, one of the easy things is don't lie, don't mislead people. So don't say, we in the past, we've given people 300% returns if that's not true. So the first thing you want to be focusing on is making sure whatever information you're giving or things you're saying out there, that they're actually truthful. And we don't want to stop there. We don't want to stop and say that it's simply that it's truthful, but also that it's not misleading. So let's say that maybe you even have given gotten a 300% return on a past deal, but the deals you're looking at right now are looking at like 1.5x. You could maybe mention that one, but you'd also want to say, hey, that was a one-off thing and that's not what we're typically getting. So even though in that scenario, you're telling the truth and that you do have one where you had a 3x return, if you know the likelihood of that happening for the deals you're trying to pitch here is not high, then you want to make sure that you clarify that. And that kind of leads into one of the other big things. And this is for advertising on social media, advertising anywhere, talking with investors, any of your documentation. We never want to give guarantees. When we're talking about investments, they are not guaranteed. They all have risks, always. This is when I've been talking with people lately, and even when I have PPMs, I have clients that say, can we soften this language? You say in there that we're going to potentially, or that it's possible that we can lose all of our money. And I'm like, that's what possibility. That's not what you're planning on, but that is something that's possible. And right now I use the example of, let's look at Bed Bath & Beyond. A Fortune 500 company, people have invested in that, and they're going under bankruptcy now potentially. There's those investors might lose not only the capital they invested, but also aren't going to get returns there. And so if we're saying that a Fortune 500, and there's even been Fortune 100 companies that have had these issues, so they can be in a situation to where their returns aren't guaranteed, not throwing any shade on anybody, but your little multi-million-dollar deal compared to these hundreds of million-dollar companies, of course you can lose that money as well. So big thing here, no guarantees ever. Everything is a projection. Past performance does not necessarily indicate future performance. And so we don't want to say every single time we've gotten 2x, so invest with me and you're going to get 2x. You can, if you're having more of a one-on-one conversation talking about the deal specifics, you can say, look, here's our underwriting, here's our projections, and if things go as we plan, this is where we think we'll end up, and it might happen to be 2x, but let them also know things don't always go as you plan. Anybody who's been in real estate or really any business knows that we can have all these great plans and all that hours plans. Until we get into it, that's when we really know what's going on.
That's a
It's
bit.
funny because a lot of investors, they're always afraid to say that it's not guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, but I'm going to get this amount of money in 6 months or 12 months or 2 years, whatever. Nope, it is not guaranteed. And I'll find like even texting, they'll be like, I'm going to get this back. I always make sure to go back and put, this is not guaranteed. So I have something in writing. And I'm like, no. For those, you mentioned the word securities. How do you know if you're offering a security?
Thank you.
So,
I wanted to know that too.
all right. So I'll give you kind of the Cliff Note version, and then we'll dive into a little bit of kind of how we tell it a little bit more. So, and one thing I will say is that we're talking about the general rules. In law, rules often always have some sort of exception. So there are worlds outside of this that you might fit some of these things and still not be a security. So our Cliff Note version of, and maybe this is not how we know we're selling a security, but what should be raising some red flags.
Mm-hmm.
If you have passive investors, this should raise the red flag of we might be selling a security. And so if we essentially are having somebody where they're saying, I want to write you a check and I want you to write some checks back to me, then that's a passive investor. And so that should be the first red flag where we say, wait a minute, let me check and let me make sure, talk with somebody who knows this stuff and see what I need to do here. So passive investors, that's a good indicator. Now with that, I know, I don't know exactly what the two of you do, but I know there are people in the groups that I've met you both with. Some exceptions would include a mortgage on a home. So a mortgage on a home or a lien that's tied to a home, that often is going to be an exception. A lot of times if we have promissory notes, I forget the exact time. I think it's like with a 9 or 10 month maturity date, that often is going to be an exception. And there's some exceptions as well. But the thing for me, if I get a red flag, if I see there's passive investors, I'm looking and saying, okay, we might be marching towards security territory here. Now, go ahead.
Just wanted to clarify, in our case, and in most of the persons that we partner with, we normally offer like a promissory note and the mortgage. So how would that be the exception?
Potentially, obviously, I gotta say potentially. I'd have to look at the exact situation, but yes, that sounds like that could qualify as an exception or an exclusion outside of the security realm.
Okay. Can you give the definition of a security?
Yeah, so that's kind of the longer version. So we use something called the Howey test. It's Howey. It's an old case, and it says that we have an investment of money into a common enterprise with an expectation of profit primarily from the work of someone else. So an investment of money into a common enterprise with an expectation of profit primarily from the work of someone else. If that's what we're investing into, then the Howey test says, okay, that means that we're selling a security. So we need to either register that security or have an exemption from registration.
Okay. Okay. I remember that. I remember that from the legal challenge that you did with Tina. I was like, just as how you just said it and you kind of did something, then you paused and you continued. That's how I had to wait for it to like click. And I'm like, okay, gotcha. And that's perfect. So guys, hope that clarified what a security is. And if you guys have questions, like feel free to pop them in the chat as well so we can ask Nick. What would be some of like, I know we just touch on it a little bit. Like when you're for a private money lender and they're looking to, as you said, invest passively, their investment is secured, it's protected, right? What things should they look for from that borrower itself? We normally advise, hey, speak to an attorney when you get a deal. When you have paperwork, have that attorney review the paperwork. What advice would you give to that lender?
Yeah, I think it's, do your due diligence like you would with any investment. And I'd say probably maybe even a little bit more because these are kind of the more non-traditional types of investments. Yeah. So yeah, you kind of hit on one thing is, have an attorney that's looking over the documentation that you're going to sign. A couple of things that I would look at is, does the borrower have an attorney or have they had somebody that's kind of vetted these documents? And it's not so much that, if they're doing this day in and day out and they've had somebody look at it one time, that could be sufficient. But I would more so be looking at that just to see, are they crossing their T's and dotting their I's? Because if they're saying, hey, we want to borrow this money, but we don't want to pay a couple $100 to have an attorney look over this contract or draft this contract. My question, and I very much understand this is very self-serving, saying, yes, you got to use people like me. I get that. But it is really what I mean, what I believe as well. Because if they're not taking those kind of formal steps to make sure that they have all of their stuff in order, then my question would be, what other steps might they be skipping that deal with the deal itself or that might affect my investment? So yeah, one, I'd say, make sure that they have their stuff. It seems like it's in good order and proceeding forward in a professional manner. I also would just look at the actual deal itself. Where is this money going to be placed? And what do you think about the likelihood of the success in that deal? And who knows whether a deal is going to be successful or not, but you as the investor, you get to decide what fits under your risk tolerance or not. And so if somebody is wanting to, let's say that I think, and this is just an example because I don't think this, but let's say that I think that multifamily is a horrible investment. And I'm going to be lending money to one of the two of you for a project. I want to know, is this multifamily? Because in my opinion, in this scenario, I think that's a horrible investment. So I don't want my money going there because I think that you're going to lose all your money. Obviously, I don't think that at all. I think that's the opposite of that. But if that's what my risk tolerance said, I've gotten hosed on multifamily before, don't want to do it again. I'd want to know, is my money going towards multifamily? Because that might make me say, you know what? I don't like taking the risks that are involved with that. So understanding the deal, where your money's actually going. And then I'd say probably the third one is knowing the borrowers themselves. Is this their first time borrowing? What have they done similar to this project in the past? If they've had previous loans, did they pay them back? Did they pay them back on time? That kind of stuff. So getting an understanding of the background of the people or the group that you are actually lending the money to, because all of those things have a bearing on the success. The deal's got to be good, obviously. But even if it's a great deal, if the operators aren't good, they can sink a good deal. So you want to understand that both the deal is good as well as the operators know what they're doing, and they have a tendency to find success in their deals as well.
That makes sense. No, I'm glad that you just touched on the multifamily thing, because so many confusion. Person would come to us and be like, hey, we got this multifamily 100 unit or whatever it is. Can you raise capital? Yeah. And they're like, can you guys raise capital? And we're like, no, that's not what we specialize in, because that's a whole different ball game. You now have to do the different, like Reg A, D, whatever, all that fancy stuff. And some persons, they don't see the difference. So what can you talk a little bit about when you're raising capital for a single family and now raising capital for a multifamily project?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there is a world in which if you're raising capital for a single family, you still might need to do the full syndication and everything like that. Depending on how you're structuring that whether it's a loan or equity or what have you, we would go back to the Howey test and then see if we fit that. We'd see, are there any exceptions or exclusion outside of this? So between multifamily and single family, there is a world in which the process and structure could look the same. But with multifamily specifically, typically we're talking about larger projects. We're talking about more expensive projects. And so with that, we're probably going to have more investors as well. And then with multifamily specifically, it's going to be a lot harder for you to get a loan if you have people that are taking a debt position in your project. And so with that, typically you do an equity raise. And so you might, right now with large multifamily, you might be able to get 60, maybe 70%, but probably more like 60% of the cost to purchase. And so you're going to have to bring in about 40%. And so syndication and using Reg D or other exemptions is the way that you do that. And particularly with multifamily, because you're bringing in, close to 40% or actually 40% of the deal, and the deal is much larger, that 40% can very easily be millions of dollars, which means you're going to have multiple investors. And in that scenario, it's going to be very rare and probably not possible. Lawyers never like to say never, but I can't think of a scenario where, if we've got 15, 20, 30 investors and a couple $1 million, that's probably not going to be, one single mortgage on a single family home. And so, yeah, with the how multifamily is going to be, the size, the scale, you're almost always going to have much more formal securities requirements and things like that.
Yeah, one of the things that when I first started hearing about like raising capital for multifamily is like, oh yeah, you need to be an accredited investor. Can you explain the concept and what the significance of their involvement in private capital raise?
Yeah, I'll explain what it is, but I will correct one thing. Whoever told you that myth, it is a myth. You don't absolutely have to be accredited. We have exemptions that apply for accredited and unaccredited. But when we're talking about accredited investors, we're talking about there's multiple ways to become accredited, but the two most common ways are through your income or your net worth. And so if we're talking about an individual, we're looking at an income of $200,000 or more the past 2 years and an expectation to make that much more this year. If it's spouses or spousal equivalents, we up that number to 300,000. So an individual is going to make 200,000. Spouses combined have to make 300,000. That's if we're doing it based upon income. And then if we're looking at your net worth, we take out the value and the equity you have in your primary residence, and we say, without your primary residence, is your net worth $1 million or more? If so, that's another way to qualify. So essentially, when we're talking about accredited investors, we're saying these are people that are typically going to be higher net worth or higher income. And so with that, the SEC understands that those are people that, nobody wants to lose their investment, but somebody who's making $200,000 or $300,000 and they do maybe a $50,000 investment, they're going to be able to bounce back a lot stronger than somebody who maybe also made a $50,000 investment, but they make $50,000 a year as well. The person that's making $200,000 or $300,000, that $50,000 might have taken them some time to make, but they also can make that back fairly quickly. Whereas the person making 50 grand, that's all that they're going to make in a whole year. So they probably took them multiple years to save that up. And so now they are looking at, they just lost their life savings. Whereas the person who's accredited might have lost a couple of years worth of savings, but they should probably are in a place to bounce back. And at the very least, they have an income that's higher to where, sure, they lost the money, but they'll be able to pay their mortgage, their rent, and their living expenses, where somebody with a lower income might be harmed by this a lot more. And so when we have accredited investors, the SEC will often give you a little bit more leeway, and you can do a few more things that you might not be able to do if you're going to have unaccredited investors in your deal.
Okay. That was good.
Yeah, that was fact. I know. I spoke to Vina, and she told me a little bit about how you can get someone accredited, but yeah, he was like, talk to Nick.
which goes. My next question would be, I know I've learned from you as well, Nick, that when you find an accredited investor, you still need to have different qualification process, like a pre-existing relationship. Then you need to have like a phone conversation or something in writing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so what you're getting into is different exemptions. And so kind of as I was saying with Betsy is that you don't actually have to be accredited for all exemptions. So if we are talking, for instance, about a Regulation D 506C exemption, that exemption allows you to have only accredited investors. So there's got to be only those high net worth or high income individuals. But with that, you can do general solicitation. So you can advertise. Obviously, we said before, no lies, no misrepresentation. You want to be conscious about what you're saying, but nonetheless, you can advertise that deal, and you don't have to know all the investors beforehand. You can say, hey, I've got this deal, and if an accredited investor says, hey, I like that deal, that makes sense, they could come into your deal. Yeah. So that was Regulation D 506C as in cat. We contrast that with Regulation D 506B as in boy. That one allows you to have an unlimited number of accredited investors. And then it also allows you to have up to 35 sophisticated investors, which I'll talk about in a second. So unlimited number of accredited, 35 sophisticated investors. But with that, you must have a pre-existing substantial relationship with all of the investors. So I will talk about pre-existing substantial relationship, but let me clarify what a sophisticated investor is first. And I know we're throwing a whole lot of stuff out of terms, technical stuff, all that. So if I'm going too fast, please slow me down. I'm figuring all day, so I'm just spitting it out. But if you're like, whoa, we can go back and look at something. So with sophisticated investors, these are people that are not accredited, but if we want to just kind of easily say it, we'd say these are people that are financially savvy. Looking at it a little bit deeper, we'd say these are people that they're not accredited, but they possess the knowledge and or the resources to determine, does this deal make sense for me? So we're looking at what types of investments have they done before? Have they only just done stocks and bonds and savings? Because if so, that's a very different type of investment and risk profile as compared to these private offerings. So what types of investments have they done before? What types of alternative investments have they engaged in? What's their educational background? If they were a finance major and maybe worked on Wall Street for a bit, they probably are sophisticated. So that's another part of it, is what's your work history and work background. Another thing that we look at is, do you have a financial planner or a financial advisor? Because maybe you don't have the financial savvy, but if you have a financial advisor that looks at all your investments beforehand and they talk with you and they understand your risk tolerance, your financial situation, and they say, yeah, this looks like a good deal, that might be enough. So we're trying to figure out, do you possess the resources to see, for my specific situation, does this make sense? Does this make sense with my financial situation? Does this coincide with my personal risk tolerance? So that's what a sophisticated investor is.
Okay.
And so I mentioned before, again, that Regulation D 506B allows you to have 35 of those sophisticated but unaccredited investors, plus an unlimited number of accredited investors. But you must have that pre-existing substantial relationship with every single one of them. And so that gets into what you were talking to Kalisha about, the meeting them beforehand and that sort of stuff. And so a lot of people say, how do I establish this pre-existing substantial relationship? So the pre-existing means that you knew them before the deal was on the table. And then the substantial part means that you have a strong understanding or a pretty good understanding as to whether they're accredited or sophisticated and the reasons why they are accredited or sophisticated. So you have an understanding of their financial background, their investment past, that sort of stuff.
So for all the persons who will think super deep on this now, one, how do you verify their financial background and all that stuff? Do you need to have something in writing just in case anything ever happens?
So yes. Now, how you verify it at the the pre-stage, it doesn't have to be something super formal, but will have had these conversations. What have you invested in before? What types of money do you make? What's your current portfolio looking like? That sort of stuff. So you don't specifically have to be taking notes while they're doing that, but you want to have those conversations. Then when they invest, if we're doing a 506B as in boy deal, they're going to 506B allows you to do what's called self-certification. So regardless of which exemption we're using, the SEC says you must take reasonable steps to verify their status. And so if you do a questionnaire that says, what types of investments do you have currently? What have you had in the past? Give us the information on your financial planner. What's your educational background? What's your work history? And so you're using all that information that they put in there to determine, are they sophisticated? Or if they say, hey, I make 200,000 or my net worth is 100,000 or $1 million, then we're using that to determine, are they accredited or not? And so if you don't have any specific reasons to know what they're saying is incorrect, and you've done some decent due diligence, then in many cases, that questionnaire alone for a 506B often will satisfy your requirement to take reasonable steps to determine their status. Okay. If we're doing a 506C deal, the 506C is in CAT, which is only accredited investors. That one, the SEC has clearly stated that self-certification alone is not reasonable steps. So I still have my clients do that self-certification, but in addition to that, we do third-party verification. And so you have an attorney that's familiar with their financial status, their financial advisor, a CPA, or there are also third-party verification companies. But you have one of those parties that's not the issuer, it's not the person making the investment, but somebody else that's looking at their tax returns and their income, or their profit and loss statement, or their net worth statement, or something like that. So you have somebody else verify, yes, they indeed are accredited.
So if you're listening and you think you meet the requirements of what Nick mentioned, who an accredited investor is, if you're not sure, guys, just as you mentioned, like go to your CPA, go to your financial advisor if you want to have an idea if you're accredited investor or not. Man, my Jamaican accent just came out with my tongue slipping. But this is really good info.
Yeah.
It's really good because I think most times as well, people always like, even for us with raising capital, we just focus on the legalities for the multifamily side, but not a lot of persons consider it for the single family side with this being protected, even if you have a mortgage. We have been seeing a lot recently is that you have lenders. They lend on a property, they have the promissory note, they have the mortgage, the deed, but they haven't gotten paid or the borrower disappeared. What legal steps would you advise that person to take before doing anything on their own?
That was good. That's a good question.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, you hit it on the head. Like before doing anything on your own, I'd say the one thing you might be able to do on your own is give them a call. See like what's going on, where's my money, what's happening, what's going on with the project. Yeah. And if you can't get a hold of them, then I'd say your next step is you want to, and this is not even self-serving because I don't handle this type of law, but you do want to call an attorney because you're probably looking at litigation at that point. And we do zero litigation. So now I'm maybe shouting out to the other lawyers, but not self-serving myself. So there you go. But yeah, so in that scenario, you assuming that you have indeed put the lien on the property, you know, you want to talk with an attorney, but your next step might be to try to foreclose on that lien, or at the very least start the foreclosure timing process. And that might be enough to motivate that borrower to say, hey, let me get them their money. Otherwise, this property is going to be tied up in litigation and nobody's getting any money for a while.
Yeah, because I've been seeing that a lot. You know, we're like, yeah, talk to an attorney or a foreclosure. Like, yeah, we tried foreclosure, it's not working. I'm like, well, get an attorney involved. I think the person ended up meeting with you as well.
What we've seen too is that they put a deed in lieu in place, but that's for
okay.
So I could go straight to them
to make it easier.
Yeah, that's a way to bypass the foreclosure for sure. So yeah, so part of it also I'd say is again you want to have somebody who knows, look at your agreement as well, because that sometimes the agreement might outline in the case of default. Sometimes the case of default, depending on how severe it is just maybe an additional interest point or two. Because I have written some promissory notes to where they have a maturity date, and if you miss that, then you know we might increase the interest rate by 2 or 3%, and you get an extra maybe 90 days or something like that. So part of that also, yeah, we want to look at what exactly is the agreement that you entered into, because that might outline what the remedies or potential remedies are as well.
Okay, that makes sense. Guys, take notes. Take lots of notes. Giving y'all a little like seconds to soak this all in, because you might be like, I'm mind blown. This is a lot of info. But
it is a lot, I know.
And it's fine that a lot of times persons get all this info and they get so overwhelmed, but they know the stuff. They know what they need to do. But they never find an attorney until something goes wrong.
That's true. Mm-hmm. So you guys, if you have any questions, ask them in the chat. Right now is like really good time to get your questions answered. No question is a dumb question. A lot of us are new, and there's questions from the beginning. You know, we have questions that are complicated, and then there's questions that like, okay, what is a deed in lieu?
Exactly.
Yeah. And Kels, you hit on the precise thing, particularly me as a transactional attorney. You know, I think my job is to figure out what you're trying to do, think of the things that could go wrong, and then we put stuff in place to where we know we kind of have a playbook for if things go wrong, we know what we're going to do, we know how it's going to be resolved, that sort of stuff. And a lot of times, because there's no urgency, nothing's gone wrong yet. We're doing this deal and we're hoping everything goes great. People think, oh, no, it's fine. I don't need to do that. But this really is a situation where, and I always mess up like euphemism stuff. So let me see. This is a situation where the ounce of cure, ounce of prevention. See, I told you I mess them up. This is a situation where the ounce of prevention versus the pound of cure, you want to pay for that ounce of prevention because the pound of cure can be dramatically more expensive. It's going to cost you time, which you cannot get back at all, which is very expensive, and it's also going to cost you money. Whereas if you pay for that ounce of prevention, then it's going to be cheaper and it's going to be quicker, because again, that bad thing or that worst case scenario happens, but we have documentation that outlines what we're going to do here. So now we have the playbook. The bad thing happened, we just run the playbook. Versus if we don't get before that and plan ahead, the bad thing happens, everybody's pointing fingers, then lawyers get involved and they get a lot more expensive, and you don't have a choice whether you really, or you kind of do, but you're going to really need a lawyer at that point, because especially if the other side has a lawyer. And again, there's going to be a lot more urgency, a lot more of an emergency type of situation, a bit less of kind of planning and slowly thinking through what we want to do. And we're going to be a lot more reactionary in that situation, which is going to cost you a whole lot more as well. And again, you're going to be dealing with an issue you're trying to resolve, and that's taking your time away from the project that you're trying to move forward.
Yeah, no, that's totally, bam. Again, I like to think imaginary gems that's dropping in the video. Like it's just all over the screen, like all those imaginary.
No, you can do like, listen, you guys throw them in the chat.
Yeah, like, you know what's crazy? You know what's gonna happen? Everyone's gonna have all these questions after, which is good. That is fine, because that means everything is soaking in, and you rewatch it, you're like, oh, that makes sense. Now I have another question. You know, like, guys, you can always put them in the chat. You can always comment after this video is posted. You can always reach out to Nick. His handle is on the screen at Nick the Lawyer. Before we wrap up, huh?
I was like, wait, I have a question.
Oh, you're good.
Let's do it.
Bring it on. My thing is if I'm raising capital for every single deal, and I'm not sure, like, should I talk to the attorney right now, or do I really need to talk to an attorney for every single deal? Like, what advice would you give to an investor who's raising capital constantly for multiple deals?
I'd say it's even worth it to maybe just find an attorney and be like, look, this is what I do. Can I pay for an hour of your time? I've got questions. I want to tell you what I'm doing, and you kind of tell me the things I should be looking out for, the things that should be red flags. So again, obviously, I'm going to say it's best to have somebody every single time, but I know that we are not cheap, and so I can tell you to have an attorney every time, but you're not going to listen to me. But what at the kind of an alternative to that is to let's have it to where, okay, I go through, I tell you what I'm doing. I see what legal pitfalls I might fall into, so that I can at least know, okay, I spent an hour with an attorney. I kind of have a general idea. And yeah, I don't know everything, but I at least know enough now that, oh, when something's happening, wait, I remember we talked about that. You know what? Maybe I should hit them up again, because this reminds me of something we talked about. I don't really remember how we were supposed to handle all that, but I at least now know that red flag is going up. And I know that, hey, there's something real here that I really do need to talk to somebody about. So that, again, if you're not going to have an attorney every single time, at least sit down initially and get a good understanding of the general legal layout of what you're doing. So that way you can at least start having those red flags pop up and know when you really, really need to be talking with somebody that's a pro at this.
Oh, smart. Because everyone would be thinking, I can't afford to have an attorney and a retainer. This is going to be so expensive. That's smart. That's a good approach for those on a budget. That's a good approach. What was your question, Betsy?
Of course, attorneys would have a loophole. I was just gonna ask you if you've seen any recent legal developments or changes in the security regulations that entrepreneurs should be aware of when raising capital.
So I'll answer that first from more of a practical point. It's not so much a change in the regulations, but it is a change in the market. So this is something I try to almost say every time that I'm speaking right now, because it is something I want people to be aware of, is that a lot of people do this stuff incorrectly and have been doing it incorrectly for the past, 5, 6, 7 years. But if we look at the market the past 5, 6, 7 years, the market has been done well. And typically the SEC is not going around and trying to see who's selling securities. Okay, let me see your stuff. Let me dig into this. Usually what happens is there's a complaint, typically from an investor, that they're upset about they didn't get a return, they didn't get their money, or they think that the issuer is doing something wrong. And then they'll complain to the SEC, and then the SEC starts investigating. And so, in the past couple years, that wasn't happening that much because everybody was making money for the most part. The market, you could get into a bad deal, but the market, 3 or 4 years later would make that deal look amazing. Now we're at a place where we're going to see, is this a good deal or not? And the market's not going to be able to save the deals like it has been for the past couple of years. And so if that happens, then you're going to start having complaints. And that's when the SEC is more likely to get involved. So it's very important. It's always been important, but even more so now, just because there's a much greater chance that, deals, even with all your hard work and due diligence and best efforts, there's a much better chance that the deals either aren't going to perform as strong as you anticipated, or maybe even perform poorly. And having a deal perform poorly doesn't mean you violate securities laws, but it does open the door more for potential securities investigations. And so I'd say market-wise, not so much legally, but market-wise, it's something that you really want to be taking into account, because there's a greater chance that it actually becomes an issue. Kind of sort of what we've been talking about. And one thing that I always say to clients is, let's say, look, you're going to pay me a whole bunch of money. We're going to make all these crazy long documents that you're like, what is this? What does this mean? You're going to have everybody sign it. And then the goal is you put this in a folder and we never look at it again. Because if we're looking at it, that means that something's gone wrong, which is okay. We at least have the playbook to move forward. But in reality, most of the time we do all this and it never really even matters at the end of the day. And it's one of those things where we say it doesn't matter until it does. You don't need a PPM and disclosures and to follow securities rules until the SEC is knocking on your door saying, hey, show me how your PPM and your disclosures and how you follow securities rules. So with the current market, there is, I would think that there's more of a likelihood to where some of this stuff is going to be tested or, more inquiries into it. So that's one, I'd say, a update, so to speak, market-wise. As far as legal updates, they're kind of slow. No major ones. There's one that I am still waiting on that I think could actually help a lot of people, not so much in the single-family space, but in the multifamily space. The SEC right now doesn't have a great set of laws for finder's fees. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times with a multifamily, let's say that I have access to people that would be willing to invest $1 million. But let's say that I'm not part of the management team, I'm not part of the main deal, but I know the people on there. I would love to be like, look, I'll give you, if I bring you $1 million, give me 3% of the investment, or give me 3%, a 3% commission on whatever money I bring to you. I would love to do that. But currently how the finder's fees rules work, they say that if you're going to take what's called a transaction-based compensation, that means that if my payment is contingent upon an investment being made, or the amount of my payment is contingent upon how much is invested. So that's a transaction-based compensation, basically a commission. So if you're going to take transaction-based compensation, then you have to be a licensed broker dealer. If you're not, then you can only pay a true finder's fee, which is, hey, Betsy, I know Kels, she might be interested in investing. You two have it from here. And once I make that introduction, I am now entitled to whatever we agreed to for payment, regardless of whether Kels actually makes an investment or not. People don't like that because Betsy's like, what if Kels doesn't make an investment, but I've just paid Nick $1,000 and I just literally just lost $1,000 and that's it. So the current setup kind of sucks. Yeah. And they have a proposed rule that would change that to where people can do what we know we want to do. But it's been proposed for like 1.5 years now, and I haven't seen any movement. I'm keeping my fingers crossed because I think it can solve a big pain point that a lot of my clients have. But right now, we're still just waiting for them to give the final ruling on that.
But wouldn't this still, I've heard something like this before for a single family. Like if we refer a lender to somebody else, whether that lender makes the investment or not, they still need to pay us a finder's fee. I think I've heard something like that. That's correct.
And that's what it is. That's a true finder's fee because they're paying you for the introduction, and the SEC is okay with that. You can pay for the introduction, but if you're paying for the investment, that's where we have an issue.
I see. That is key right there. I like that you clarified that because I know a lot of persons who would introduce their private money lenders to another investor but they're not paid a finder's fee at all. It's usually sometimes whenever that deal is closed or the lender actually goes through the transaction, that's when they're paid. So I like that you mentioned that.
Yeah, so the scenario you just mentioned, that probably would be, that sounds like it's a transaction-based compensation, which means you need to be a licensed broker dealer to get that payment, assuming that a security is involved in the first place.
Okay. Oh wow. See, damn. I did not know that. I know like little bits and pieces of it, but I've heard it from different people, different perspectives. So that clarified. That's good. That's
Like from a lawyer.
From an attorney. Yes. Guys, like we still have a little bit more time left with Nick. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them. I think the more Nick explains stuff, the more questions even come to my mind as well. We tend to like forget like little things that we tend to forget. So I like, especially with the finder's fee portion. So, and again, so it's not a referral fee. It is a finder's fee, right?
Yeah, I mean, the name doesn't really matter too much. They focus on what's actually going on here. And so, yeah, whether we call it a referral fee or a finder's fee, you're paying solely for that referral, solely for that introduction. And once the introduction is made, the person making the introduction is entitled to payment regardless of whether an investment is actually made. If it's set up like that, that's within the SEC's confines and regulations, and you're following their rules. If we're doing it to where I say I have people and I introduce them, but you don't pay me until they actually invest, that ends up looking like a commission and probably is a violation there.
That's good to know. That's good to know. Because even like now I'm like thinking like, I don't know if it's like other persons who get super technical. Oh, so then do I have to hunt down the investor to make sure I get paid? Because I'm like, yeah, then, but how do I guarantee or ensure that I get paid when I do that introduction? Maybe that's persons are thinking that as well.
Yeah, you have an agreement. So I have some clients, like most clients, when I explain this, they're like, yeah, I don't want to do that. Because as we've talked about, I could introduce you to 10 people and you pay me $1,000 per introduction. I made 10 grand and you got zero investment dollars. So a lot of clients don't like to do that. But I have had some clients to where we'll set up an agreement. They have a finder and we set up a finder's agreement and we make it very clear the finder is entitled to the payment based upon the introduction being made, not based upon the investment being made. There's probably other ways it can be done as well, but the two ways that I've done it is to where I've done it one to where we had an agreement and they pay just a flat monthly rate. Like I'll pay you $5,000 a month. You invest me to all the people that you think might be interested every month, and you're getting $5,000 a month or whatever that number is going to be. So that's one way. Or I've also had it per introduction. So I'll give you $500 per email introduction that you give me, regardless of whether an investment's made or not. So those are the two ways I've done it, based upon time or based upon the number of investors. There's probably some other creative ways that you could figure out how to do it as well, but those are the two that I've worked with.
Yeah, I think we've heard about the referral agreement. That's standard. So if you guys need that as well, you know who to call. Nick the lawyer, reach out to him on Instagram. But no, like Nick, this has been phenomenal. Like super, super amazing. Like we appreciate you being here. Clarifying all the little things that we tend to overthink. The big things we don't need to worry about that's why we have you. You know, you got our backs with the paperwork, so we don't need to worry about all that stuff. We just need to know the basics. And then when you have more questions, again, you guys go to @Nick the lawyer, set up your consultation, and ask him all the questions you want, even if it's an hour. Make sure you have 100 questions. Bam, bam, bam. But no. Guys, let us know what you think about this episode. Like this episode, subscribe to our channel. We're available on all podcast platforms. And also, guys, when you listen to this video or this, episode rather, and if you listen to it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, be sure to leave us a review. You can also leave us questions, do a poll. Just let us know what you guys think, because we're doing this to share. We are providing a space to share what we're doing. We are learning as we go along.
Yeah.
And just have this space just talking about all things capital, whether you're doing it for real estate, for a business, and all aspects of raising private capital. So
yes, if you comment, you will make it so that the algorithm shows it to more people. So
yes.
it's more out there for everybody. We're easier to find. I know sometimes we have to like send the link because they can't find us. So.
Goodness, it's so hard. But you guys can connect with us. The best way to connect with us is on Instagram. Mine is at Kalisha Carter. Then you have at _life with Betsy and or guest today at Nick the Lawyer. Guys, go over on Instagram. Follow Nick on Instagram, guys. Check out all the services that he has to offer. He's very active on social media as well. So he's not the type of person that will respond in like a couple of days. He's super active.
Yeah, super great content too. I've been
Lots of bringing value. That is key, and not a lot of persons bring value. Everyone always want money first, but I think that you bring so much value, the blessing is gonna just turn around and just pour right in because you just gave so much value. But thank you again for being here. Thank you guys for listening, for watching. And until next time, we'll see you guys next week on another episode of Money Mondays.